Premed office hours. It is July 9th, 2025. We are living the dream of secondary essay editing, late primary application submissions, or riskier, not late, riskier primary application submissions, and the beginning of interview season.
Interview season.
We are starting to get MD interviews. DO interviews have been happening for a while. DO acceptances are already happening. So the joy is there. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of MAPT Medical School Headquarters, author of the Premed Playbook series, and most importantly, friends of these two amazing people: Carlos Tapia, former director of student affairs at Icahn School of Medicine, former director of admissions at Ann Burnett, TCU. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
I love it. Living the dream. You got your mustache growing before November so that you can
shave it off by November.
No. So you can win all of the competitions in November. You're just getting a start or early start there. Also hanging out with me today, the one, the only, Dr. Christine Crispin, former director of admissions at UC Irvine, former AdCom member, director of curriculum at CACMed at USC. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, thank you. Also living the dream.
We're all just living the dream. Did you know nightmares are dreams as well? So
it's totally appropriate.
When you say you're living the dream, we don't know if it's good or bad, but hey, that's just the way it is. I want to start the conversation today. I'm sure it'll be a question that will come up.
It is in there.
Hasn't already. Wait, what is this one? Do you think the big ugly bill is GLI? I don't know what GLI means. Do you know what GLI means? GLI meaning. What is it?
I don't know what that is either.
Yeah, I don't know. Unless it was just a typo. So let me know what that means. But yeah, I want to talk about the big beautiful bill as it was named. The big thing for our audience specifically is the cap of student loans at $200,000 for medical students. We were just chatting before we hit record about the potential impacts of that. Christine, you had some thoughts about what you hope medical schools will do, which I'm not holding my breath, but what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think, the LCME, if you don't know, is the accrediting standards for MD schools. They are always, and just coming out of CAC, I know this firsthand, they're always on your case about student loan indebtedness and the cost of tuition. And so I like to think somebody in a med school would find their inner soul and look at tuition prices again and say, okay, let's try to help students, even to some degree, get tuition more in line with what they can borrow in loans.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe that will happen, but one can hope.
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? When you are running a business, which medical schools are a business, when you are running a business and you have your expected revenues of tuition dollars coming in, and all of a sudden you are like, hey, I'm going to reduce tuition just because with our same expenses every year. It's hard. Now, we don't have an inside look at the financial accounts of every medical school. A lot of schools have really huge endowments. Most of that, I think, comes from donations from wealthy alumni. So we don't know, right? Are medical schools operating at a loss? Are they not? It's like, what's going on there? But the idea that the loan cap will all of a sudden cause medical schools to go, you know what? We have been charging too much for tuition. Let's go ahead and reduce that cost. I just don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. No. I did message a friend who's a dean of admissions, and I said, what is the conversation happening right now in your circles? And they said, the school definitely is not looking at lowering tuition. That's just not something that they care to do. They are looking at trying to figure out where they can potentially get more financial aid money to decrease the cost of that tuition with financial aid, which to me is like, isn't that the same thing of lowering tuition? Like, what's the difference? And so, yeah, I think schools might get creative with financial aid and trying to help with that. I think there are rumors that some schools that were potentially looking at going tuition free may speed up some of that, some of those plans. But yeah, I think the big thing that I just want to get across to everyone, the overwhelming message online has been now only rich people can go to medical school, because who has the money to pay the difference? And that's just not what's happening, right? It's not a law that says students are only allowed to borrow $200,000. It's just saying, hey, the federal government is only giving $200,000. You're going to have to go to a regular old bank to cover the difference. So students are still going to be able to take out loans for whatever the cost of medical school will be. It's just going to be more paperwork. It's going to be a pain in the butt. Historically, we have said stay away from private loans. They're the least flexible type of education loans. My hope is that the private loan industry, the banking industry, says, hey, you know what? We're going to fill a gap here and we're going to get more creative and more flexible with our loans. TBD, right? All of this will take place next year for loans that are originating next year. I think the big thing is just take a breath and things will play out. And right, Sean here, I don't think there's a reason to be sad. Federal loans used to be capped at like $56,000. And tuition to go to medical school was really low at the time. And then they removed the cap and tuition across the board has skyrocketed. And now they put a cap back in place, which I think is appropriate. It's change and it's a pain in the butt. I don't think it's devastating. It's just change. That's my point of view. I don't know if you all have different. Yeah, it's just normal pre-med panic. And I was actually disappointed to see some really big physician influencers jumping onto the panic and outrage culture and kind of diving into this. Only rich students can go to medical school now. It's just not true. It's just a bigger pain in the butt. So I knowing as a physician, right, banks love future high income earners. So banks really love to have physicians as customers. And so I think they're going to get creative to try to get students because they know that attrition rate once you're in medical school is really low and you're going to come out and hopefully make a good amount of money. And they're going to want to obviously have you for your student debt, but then your mortgage and your car and all of the other services that they can try to sell you. So I am hopeful, but that's my general disposition. So hopefully you all can stay hopeful as well. Stay out of the outrage culture.
It's the message of hope. We'll keep it there.
This is all hope, right? It's change. And you know what? This is not written into the Constitution, and assuming we have a new administration at some point, which we don't know if we ever will, but assuming we have a new administration, it can change again. Again, my personal belief is I think we should have caps, because without caps, tuition has just gone up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And so anyway. All right, let's get some answers here. Oh, wait, but before we get to Project Species, I wanted to highlight our friend Vanity Nutrition, getting ready to move across the country for medical school. Couldn't have done it without Application Academy. Please add my school to MAPT. We will. We'll get it added there to MAPT, Vanity Nutrition. Awesome. Congratulations. Fantastic. All right. Due to being busy with MD secondaries, I will probably be submitting my ACOMAS primaries around July 15th. Is that considered late? Carlos, the timelines are generally in sync. MDDO, TMDSAS, they all open around the same time. We generally talk about the DO timeline being longer, though, and more forgiving for a little bit of a later application. Do you think July 15th is late for the DO world?
I don't think it's late. I just think there's an adjustment of expectations. I think what I've seen with a lot of pre-health students is like, well, I'm not going to submit then, I'm going to submit here. And then I hope that then the process sort of catches up with me, right? I think it's understanding where you're submitting and how long this whole process takes, that you might be a delay of when you hear information back. I think that's the biggest misconception that I've seen. It's you don't have to submit right when it opens. It's highly encouraged so that you get the ball rolling. But if you're submitting later, don't assume that just because you do that, then all of these things are going to diminish in terms of like quickness and response and moving quicker in the process just because you're not with a big rush at the beginning. I think I've tried to explain to people that you're just shifting your timeline to a later date, and be mindful of that, because I think then it starts to affect your well-being of like, I'm not hearing back. And it's like, well, you didn't submit until here. That doesn't necessarily mean that your timeline is compressed. It's just shifted to that time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's considered late. I think that's the time you're submitting. That's the time you're submitting. The season goes on for a full year. Schools should review your application when they receive it.
Yeah. Let me just show this real quick. Let me find my window to share. I shared this with you all this morning. Too many windows. Share screen. Window here. So looking at, I keep track of AMCAS. I have a tool that goes and looks every day where AMCAS is processing applications. And I know this is the AMCAS, but bear with me because I think it'll help with the ACOMAS idea. As you can see, right, this is how many days it took to start processing applications that were ready for review on these dates here on the x-axis. And so it peaked out at 39 days a couple times here for applications that were ready for review, meaning it was submitted and transcripts were received by AMCAS near the end of June, beginning of July. These applications didn't start to get verified until 40 days after this submission date, right? So for dates that you submitted and were ready for review on July 1st, you weren't being verified for 41 days. So ACOMAS's application is mostly a flat line of 3, 4, 5 days. It's all down here for verification timing. And so if you submit July 15th and your application is processed and verified on July 20th, you're still in a better situation compared to the AMCAS people, and right. you're okay. You're okay. A lot of people are saying that the processing this year is slower. It's the same. It's just for students that are in it, it always feels this is 2025, and so we're right around 30 days already, 34, 35 days rounded up. For applications processing as of 6/4, which is right around here, it's about the same, right?
It really does seem slow.
It's just, I think that's just human psychology of like every year you're like, this is worse, this is terrible, this is slow. It just is. So now I have the data to back it up. Now that I'm tracking it every day, so it's fun to see that. Dawa, thanks for all your support. Does the 2-week rule for secondaries also go for DO schools, or is it a little more lenient? Christine, is there a 2-week rule for secondaries?
No, for some schools there could be.
There could be.
For sure. But the general rule that I don't know where that 2-week came from, but no, I don't think there's a hard rule for all secondaries to be in for 2 weeks.
Yep.
I think the most important thing is you look at what the school says they want it in. Some schools say 2 weeks, some schools give you 30 days from the time of receipt. Obviously, I think the bigger thing, it's kind of like the same unwritten rule for submitting early, is you want to get it back in because this is generally the last step before you go into review. for the schools. And so you certainly don't want to sit on it for 30, 40 days either. You got to find that happy medium.
Yeah.
You return it because, it takes, I tell this to my students that I'm working with. I was that person who all of a sudden in mid-July was like, oh my God, we have applications to review. And
Yep.
realized that I had to get on it. So it takes a minute for everybody to be ready, but do it as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I think the 2-week rule, again, generally is because of rolling admissions, right? The earlier everything's in, the earlier you can be invited for an interview, taking up those spots, etc. And then just the idea that it is a potential flag that a school can look at and go, hey, the majority of our students are sending the secondaries back within 2 or 3 weeks. This student submitted in 4 weeks. They potentially are less interested in our school.
Right.
So maybe we should be less interested in them. So that is a potential way that schools can view that.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
But I will say this, if it's a difference between 2 weeks and 3 weeks and a good product and a bad product, take the third week.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Sumiti. If I'm planning to take the MCAT mid-April 2026, because I'll finish my prereqs in December 2025, I already created a double AMC account, but I'm wondering how long in advance I should schedule it. You should schedule it as soon as the dates open for registration in October. That's when you should schedule. Those dates fill up fast. So worse than getting Taylor Swift tickets. FC Barca, as a reapplicant, I'm currently averaging 12-day turnaround for my secondaries. Is that still ideal? Great. It's within 2 weeks, which isn't a rule anyway. James, hello. Would it be an issue if you took one prereq class per semester alongside with your core and major classes? Also, would it be an issue if it takes you 5 years as opposed to the typical 4? Diving into a lot of micro, I call it, Carlos, of like thinking about all of the little things, being concerned about all of the little things. We often talk about there's no one perfect path to medical school. This is a path. Will schools be concerned that prereqs are spaced out that much?
I mean, could, right? Because there's this normal assumption that everybody does everything in 4 years. You apply your junior year, you move on the very traditional path. But I think if you stretch it out and this is your journey for whatever reason, right? You're not just making this up just because you want to make it up. There has to be a reason, I think, for it too, right? It's adding to the context of like, how long should I submit secondaries? When should I submit my primary? Why are you stretching out your degree to 5 years? It's almost like all of these questions should also make a person reflect of like, why am I holding on to a secondary when I know that I can write it and finalize it and submit it, right? What's with this? I'm going to hold it on for 4 weeks, or I'm going to hold on to my application for a month. Same here. Why am I stretching out my degree to 5 years just for the fun of it? Because I want to do it this way. I think it just depends on the school, but I think there's a lot of that sort of reflection and thinking of like, what is it for? What's the benefit of it? But it's your journey, and I think you're going to have to explain that in some form or fashion or way if you get asked the question. It'll be interesting to know why, right? And I don't think it can be. And I was having a conversation with one of my applicants yesterday of essay reviews and secondary reviews, and there was a question, and my response was like, "Why?" And the person's like couldn't give me a response. They were just like, "Just because I did it." I'm like, sometimes that's probably not going to be okay. You're probably going to have to provide more context than a simple "just because I did." So it could be seen as good or bad. I think it just depends. At the end of the day, you should have a reason why you decided to take this route.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Got that one already. Oh, A little bit different. Completing prereqs, taking MCAT April, apply in May. Is this a realistic goal? I will tell you, come tomorrow to MCAT office hours, which will be a new series that we're running on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I will be with Petros Manasi, who is a 25+ year expert in the MCAT space. Come ask that question then. We're going to have lots of awesome, fun stuff going on. Eva, I was raised Mormon, but left the church while at UF. Go Gators. Got indoctrinated in college. I'd like to write about it for my adversity essays, but I'm worried it would be inappropriate. Thoughts? Very interesting. A nice, authentic kind of story here, Christine, that a student may be concerned is inappropriate. I've actually seen a lot of left the church essays and stories in writing. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel like there's going to be a trend today. I think it depends on what you say.
Yeah.
There are certainly valid reasons why you leave a church or leave anything for that matter. And I feel like the context of the adversity is going to matter. If I would not encourage you, no matter what the adversity is, to bash a church or to reflect negatively upon it. But if you made a personal decision that was right for you and it was a challenge to make that decision because pressures and various things like that, I think that's a reasonable challenge / adversity without really giving this situation bad, that situation bad. It's more of things happened. It wasn't for me. I had to make some hard decisions and this was the one I made. I think that can work. So I really do think it depends on what you say and how you say it.
Yeah. Which is where essay editing comes into play, right? We have a team, Christine, Carlos, and other amazing former directors of admissions who help review this writing. And so if you want some eyes on that, you can go to, I'll put a link here, go to our essay editing page and check that out. Get some eyes on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Dak has an interesting question. What SMP GPA is competitive? Is there a general equivalent where 3.7 SMP GPA equals a 3.9 undergrad GPA or something similar? Carlos, for students who are doing SMPs, right, theoretically, they're doing it because they need to improve their GPA. So I always talk about, like, you want to get as close to a 4.0 as possible for as long as possible. Is maybe the flip of the question is a better question, is when is an SMP not great because you didn't get a good GPA?
Well, I think when your undergrad's here, right, and then your SMP ends up being down here, it's a concern. To your point, right, you always want to maintain or go above and beyond what you have already achieved in terms of the undergrad GPA, but there's no equivalent. Like a 3.7 isn't equal to 3.9 in the SMP. It's, again, just academic rigor demonstrated that you're ready to sort of enter medicine and acquire all this knowledge and that you're going to be successful in the program. So maybe take a step back and don't try to find the equivalent, and just, to Dr. Gray's point, right, like try to get close to a 4.0. That's the top of the scale. But there is really no equivalent in my eyes.
Do as well as you can for as long as you can.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Here's an interesting question. Do you anticipate MD PhD admissions will be more competitive this cycle considering the loan cap? So for those of you who maybe came in a little bit late, you can go back and watch some of the replay. We talked about the bill and loan caps a little bit at the beginning, with the general idea that not a devastating change. It's just a pain in the butt to go get private loans on top of federal loans. And the idea that MD PhD admissions will be more competitive, it's interesting, right? It kind of reminds me of the Fauci, the Fauci bump.
Effect.
Yeah. This idea that, hey, COVID is here. we saw a huge increase in applications that first year. And it's like, oh, the Fauci effect. And I'm like, the Fauci effect, I know where that came from, right? That term that came from a competing company that happened to have access to a reporter to tell this story. Students don't just wake up in March of 2020 and go, you know what? There's a global pandemic, and I think I'm going to apply to medical school this year. Right? The application to medical school takes years of planning. The Fauci effect was nothing more than students that were planning to apply in 2021, rushing an application in 2020, going, "Ooh, no MCAT? I'm going to throw my hat in the ring." And the no MCAT thing didn't actually pan out anyway. All the schools, they're like, "Yeah, we're thinking about going no MCAT." Like, only 2 or 3 maybe actually did. And so the same thing here, right? Now that we have a federal loan cap, right? Again, this is a federal loan cap. You can still go get private loans to cover the difference. Students aren't going to just wake up and go, you know what? I'm going to apply to MD, PhD programs. You're free to go ahead, but those programs are going to know whether or not you're doing it just for the free money now.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to get more competitive.
And can I add that maybe the MD PhD is not going to be competitive because of the loan cap? I think it's going to be more competitive because funding has diminished for the PhD side. Correct. And I think there's going to be less opportunity, especially for MSTP programs where you are paid stipends.
Correct.
You research and be in school. That one, the class size will probably diminish, and now they're going to be selective. Yep. So it's not the loan cap; it's the other piece of
it's the loss of funding of other programs. Yeah.
So the loss of funding, potentially smaller MD PhD class sizes, and we're going to see an increase in applications because yes, students will apply to MD PhD programs, going, oh, free tuition. I want that.
I only have to spend 10 years in med school to do it.
Correct. So the result will be, it looks like a more competitive cycle, which we can go, oh, it's because of the loan cap, but it is, but it's not. So yeah, correlation doesn't equal causation. As the old adage says. All right. Hi. I applied late last cycle and had 2 interviews that turned into rejection, probably because I applied late due to health issues. Should I mention about health issues being the reason? Carlos, my initial thought is like, well, where does this come up? Right? It's not a very common question of like, hey, you didn't get into medical school last year. Why? Maybe it's a little bit more common of like, if you applied last year and you didn't get in, what have you done to improve your application? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that was my first initial reaction. Is like, should I mention about the health issues being the reason? Was like, where's this question? Like, are they asking you specifically, tell us what you think went wrong? But I think it's hard to tell, right? Even if you believe that is the reason that you receive rejections, you got all the way to the interview stage, and that's quite a feat, right? Like, meaning like you've competed for an interview spot through all of the applications you were invited to interview.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it's not the health issues, but I also feel like it's not because you made it to that point. And how did they discover, right, that you had health issues in general, unless you mentioned it in some form or way? But to Dr. Gray's point, I think the question is, what have you done as a reapplicant since the last time you applied to improve your applications? I don't think any school would specifically ask, not that I know of from my perspective, that would say, like, tell us the reasons why you believe you were rejected. So, but I wouldn't mention it because you don't know if that's true. I don't think any school has specifically told you, and they have. Yeah. That's a first for me.
Yep. Right. Very common question that we get, Christine. Major is affecting GPA, and will that be taken into account? Emma says, I'm a chemical engineering major and my GPA is on the lower end of MD acceptance stats. Will the fact that I'm a chemical engineering major impact the way my GPA is viewed. How much time you got when you're reviewing these applications going, well, what's your major? Let me look at my sliding scale comparison.
Which school did you go
Which
to? Do they
school?
give grade bumps? Do
Which
they not give grade
professors?
bumps? Who's meaner? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Emma. No, they won't.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
They don't.
I need that button on my, my soundboard here.
They don't. I mean, there is an expectation that you're going to do well. And I'm curious to know what the lower end of MD acceptance stats. I mean, does that mean you have a 3.5 or a 3.6 as opposed to a 3.7 or a 3.8? That means you're perfectly fine. So there's a lot of unknowns in this, but no matter what, no, they're not going to take your major into consideration. That's just a fun fact for them. Okay, she was chemical engineering major. Great, moving on.
Yeah. Yeah, the great equalizer, as much as I dislike the MCAT, that's kind of the role of the MCAT, is the great leveler, equalizer to compare students to an equal test, removing any sort of institutional variables, major variables, etc. So focus on that MCAT, and come to MCAT office hours tomorrow if you want to. All right.
I feel like I need to go to MCAT office hours just to listen and
come
know
learn
what is being said.
Come learn. This would be fun. We're gonna go over some questions and really, Petros is phenomenal with how he breaks down questions. So we have some questions. We're gonna break them down and talk about them and answer questions and all that kind of stuff. Appetizers and sushi. I'm hungry now. I'm 42 years old and applying in the 26-27 cycle. Will my application be overlooked because of my age? Carlos, that's illegal, isn't it? To overlook an application, have age discrimination. I'm not saying it never happens.
It used to be.
Title. I forgot what title it is, but yeah, it doesn't matter. I think they see it.
Yeah.
I've seen students in that age range.
Getting in.
Yeah.
I think if I can chime in, I think the bigger thing is you're going to have to explain not necessarily why you're applying at that age, but why you have shifted careers or what the change is that now you have decided to go into medicine.
Yep. Yeah. Good luck. My general answer is almost always like, you're just a regular old applicant, right? Yes, you're older and you have more experiences, but everything's the same. You have to prove why you want to be a doctor. You're going to have to prove why now. And so get that story. We love working with non-treds over at medicalschoolhq.net. Come work with us on essays and interview prep and get your story polished for your applications and interviews. Vanity Nutrition chiming in. I'm a bit older than you and starting this year, use MSAR for MD schools to see if they accepted 40 plus applicants in the last few years. Also many DO schools like Career Changers. It's good info. Go to the MSAR and actually look, did you accept anyone in my age range? And potentially, right, I don't think they show similar to like out of state data. A school may say, hey, we do accept out of state, but then you go and look and there's 4,000 applications and they interviewed 2 people. But no, you don't accept out of state. Yes. So I wish the data was a little bit more complete to say, hey, there were 100 people in the 40 to 45 age range that applied to us and we interviewed 10 of them. That's a good indication that they like or are okay with older applicants. But they only show the data of their class profile of here's who has been accepted. So it's very incomplete data and we can't make a lot of great decisions based off of it because number one, we don't know if they accepted more older students, but those older students just didn't go to that school. They chose another school instead. Or older students looked at that data and said, oh, they didn't accept anybody or their class doesn't have anyone of this age range. therefore they don't accept, so I'm not going to apply. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating data point. And they're not actually giving the school the chance to say yes or no. I don't know if that makes sense. It's something I talk about a lot, of this kind of self-perpetuating data, where we're using incomplete data as a decision maker when we just shouldn't be using that data in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the data is just fun to look at, but we don't need to make decisions based on it. All right. Dr. Gray, if I had an F in Orgo 1 and then an A in Orgo 2 the very next semester, is this a huge problem that can hold me back? Well, you have to retake Orgo 1. So I don't know if you've already retaken Orgo 1. And if it doesn't make sense that you were able to take Orgo 2 with an F in Orgo 1, usually that's a registration block to say, hey, you haven't completed the prereqs for this next step. But if you've retaken Orgo 1 and you've done well, move forward. One data point is not going to kill you. Here's an interesting question from Miles. Do individual schools tend to look more favorably on LORs from physicians at their affiliated hospital versus other hospitals? Or currently working in healthcare at that hospital? Could that be a con? Currently working in healthcare at that hospital, could that be a con? I'm not really sure about that second part. Yeah. Carlos,
I just wanted, there was another question, or I think I saw it in the thread and it wasn't posted, about like attending school at the undergrad, the same undergrad affiliated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know where that's coming from. Now I'm seeing like multiple questions about affiliations from undergrad, grad, hospital systems. I don't think there's a less favorably, like more, right? It's within the system. It's a physician.
Unless you're lucky enough to get interviewed or whatever by an AdCom member who knows the person writing the letter.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the general weight changes, but I think sometimes you may encounter, oh, I know that person. So you personally lend the weight of that knowledge to them.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Play that game. There's one game that I talk about, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this if you ever talk about this. This only works for AMCAS applications because of COMIS and TMDSAS, all letters go to all schools. But on the AMCAS application, you can pick and choose which letters go to which schools. You can only have 10 letters total in your application, and then those go out. I have talked about before potentially playing a game where if a physician that you're going to already get a letter from, and they're going to write you a strong letter, if they are a graduate of one of the schools that you're applying to, potentially saying, hey, Dr. Smith, you went to University of Florida. I'm applying to University of Florida. You've already agreed to write me a letter, blah, blah, blah. Can you write me 2 letters, right? It's the same letter, but one of them is Dr. Smith, the UF graduate, talking to the UF admissions committee directly. And the other letter is Dr. Smith just talking generically to the rest of the admissions committees. And you have to kind of keep those letters straight to say, hey, the Dr. Smith as a UF alumnus, I want to make sure that one goes to UF and the other generic letter goes everywhere else. That's kind of the only time where I'm like, if there's an ability to play that game and you want to, and the person's willing to, great, go for it. Because that person can specifically talk to the culture of the school, at least at that time, and going through that school, and can now speak to you as someone also going to that same school. Whether or not that helps or not, it's just another variable to potentially play. I don't know what you guys think of that.
I have students who do it.
Yeah.
They literally tried to say, oh, I got a letter from so-and-so. He went to school here. She went to school there.
Yeah.
I'm going to have them I'm only sending that particular letter to that particular school.
Yeah.
All right, you do you.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
it's nice. I don't
sure.
think it's going to make or break an application, but I think it's just a nice little touch.
I would say though, always use caution when they don't have them call the school. That's where you're going to irritate the AdCom
Yeah.
members.
Don't go
Like
crazy.
when they start surpassing the process.
Yeah.
Had that experience too, so just don't do that.
What were you gonna say, Carlos? No, that's not all right. Health issues forced me to push my MCAT back to July 2020. July 2025, July 25th, I'm assuming 2025. If I did the throwaway school method I'll come back to that. For my primary and add my schools on August 25th, will I be okay to pre-write secondaries and submit by September 1st? Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. It's a little bit later, but if you're gonna do well, that's great. The thing that threw me off guard, this isn't a throwaway school method. It's a apply to one school method. I don't know where this idea that the one school that you're applying to has to be a throwaway school. Apply to schools that you want to go to. Period.
I actually tell students apply to a school that you know absolutely no matter what your MCAT score is, you want to go there.
Yeah.
Pick the one you know for sure that no matter what the result is, you're applying there.
Yeah, there's this fear of being a reapplicant that adds to the throwaway school thought, but don't do that. Don't waste your money. The AAMC does not need your donation.
God, no.
All right. Let's see. Scrolling back through. We were talking about this recently. What is the stance on using AI generated tools to edit essays or AI tools to edit essays? AMCAS changed their stance and has a pretty kind of AI friendly message, as long as the core message is the students and the writing is the students. Go ahead and use those tools for brainstorming and editing and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I couldn't find Comus's direct stance, and I didn't go and create an application yet. So if any of you apply to a Comus this year and remember what potentially you were attesting to when you submitted your application, again, I don't know TMDSAS either. I know CASPA on the PA side is still very much anti AI, and you're saying you haven't used any AI tools for it. So go for it. Chicos, how long would I need to live somewhere before applying to be considered in-state? I'm moving to New York in January from Texas and plan to apply in 2027. Thank you. Oh, Carlos, you were director of admissions at a Texas medical school, but it was not a public Texas medical school. So the whole TMDSAS and Texas residency wasn't a big part of at least the application coming in. Were you guys favorable on Texas residents, or you didn't really care residency status?
It didn't matter, but I know from experience that, say I've gone to undergrad in this state and I consider this to be home. In-state versus out-of-state, I think really matters when it comes to tuition purposes. Like for me as an admissions person, if you were declaring that this was home for you, I would have wanted to see how you engage in the community at home, right? If all of your experiences were like out of state, I would go home, where my parents were, but I consider this home. Then I'm like, there's the correlation here that is not adding up.
Yeah.
So I don't think for us it mattered that much, but I think in the application, in the grander scheme of things, I would want to see that, like, where have you done your experiences? What do you consider home? Can you convey through your application, what is your community versus like, oh no, I've been here for a year, 12 months. But if you haven't done anything, like I almost feel like even then it's not really a resident of the state. I don't know. So I see it.
Yeah. I think ultimately the answer comes down to it depends on the state and what the state laws are for declaring residency. Almost all of the schools will just go by the residency requirements for the state. Obviously, Texas is very picky for the TMDSAS and the public schools there because they have a mandate, a state law that says out-of-state students can only take up to 10% of the class. I know UW up in Washington is very much in-state friendly and does a lot of verification around what your residency truly is.
Yep.
People try to play games with this, and students will live in one place, graduate from school, and be a resident of another state and kind of try to stay under the radar of like not changing their driver's license and not doing anything. They're working in another state, which generally is after school, you're setting up residency in that state technically. So a lot of students kind of illegally don't change residencies because they want to keep their main residency where their parents are still living and where they were a resident of. But yeah, go to New York's website, just Google residency requirements for New York and see what they say.
There was a comment that I had seen, I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, that even the state of Texas was now trying to change what they define an in-state resident, because I think again, it's all down to tuition purposes and whether you consider, but there was people that were moving out of state just for college and you live here and they consider there were, and again, I don't know how true this was, but that the state was trying to say like, no, you have to officially have graduated from a high school within the state to then be considered for in-state purposes for tuition at an undergrad. Because people, to your point, were abusing of like, yeah, I'm a Texas resident after a couple of years, and like, no, that's not true. Because I think even when I was still working here in admissions, like one of the requirements was like buying home or having established a home. So parents would buy a home for a year for the years they were in college, and then they would leave and rent it out, right? Like it wasn't really home; it was home at the time for their kids. So I don't know how much is true, but states I think are getting a little stricter even on that. So
yeah, it's a bunch. It's a bunch. It's an interesting question. There was a previous question of where to get some good clinical experience without blowing a lot of money on a medical assistant certification. Check out CAPYEAR. CAPYEAR is a little bit lower than all the other ones out there, and we're partners with them. So capyear.co. You can go check that out. I'll put that link here. But this is an interesting follow-up question that came through, Christine. When are the ideal pockets of time for clinical experience / exposure, full-time student / pre-med? I would argue there are no pockets. It's all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before. There may be semesters where you have a lighter schedule and you can devote 2 to 5 hours per week, 10 hours per week in some sort of a volunteer work capacity. Maybe you're working one shift a week or something like that. And there may be times where it's only 2 hours because your work schedule is pretty heavy. I do think summer breaks are obviously the most obvious ideal time. And I also recognize spring break or winter break, which is 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the breaks, you're not going to get a full-time job or you're not going to get a job during that time, but you can certainly shadow, volunteer, and do other aspects. And so I think, Ryan, to your point, there are no great pockets of time. It's you have to look at your calendar and see what pockets of time you have and do your best to find them.
Yeah, I just warn students, the fact that you're a full-time student is not an excuse not to have experiences during that time.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of summer only or holiday break only. I usually call that out.
Yep. Just because once you're in medical school, there's no pockets. It's everything everywhere all at once.
Yep.
So do that. Michelle has a quick question here. Hello, Michelle. Can you comment on Casper scores? Do you recommend adding other schools if Casper is second quartile, if otherwise a strong app? I'll just add, I would not make a school list based on a Casper score. Just
Agreed.
Casper, apply to the schools that the student wants to apply to and go from there. I wouldn't change anything. All right, friends. That brings us to the end of another Premed office hours. Again, starting tomorrow, July 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern, I will be back with Petros Manassi, our kind of lead for test prep and tutoring here at medical school headquarters now. He was with Kaplan for 25 plus years, leading MCAT and pre-med services there. He is a true expert in the MCAT space. So we're going to have MCAT office hours now on Thursdays to go along with pre-med office hours. So we have the advising stuff on Wednesdays, test prep stuff on Thursdays, and just trying to help out in more ways for all of you to get through this crazy, crazy process. So hopefully that was helpful. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Carlos, Christine, thanks for joining. Bye-bye.